Mr. President.
The Senator from New Jersey.
Mr. President, I'm glad to have been here to hear the distinguished chairman of the Judiciary Committee talk about the need for oversight and the responsiveness that executive branch agencies owe to the United States Senate and its committees. In doing so, I'm having a similar problem with the State Department as it relates to getting information about actions that have taken place with reference to political reprisals and firings of the State Department, and subject to being investigated right now by the Inspector General of the State Department and a special counsel. So I can share in his concerns about the inability to get information from the executive branch as a legitimate exercise of oversight. But I rise today, as I have so many times in my career, to be the voice for the people of Puerto Rico in the United States Senate. On September 20th of 2017, Hurricane Maria, a powerful Category 5 storm, ripped through the center of the island of Puerto Rico, wiping out its electrical grid and leaving millions of American citizens disconnected and in the dark. And this was preceded by Hurricane Irma, which also struck the island, a double body blow. What ensued were months of absolute darkness, hunger, despair, and death. And while the president played golf in Mar-a-Lago, thousands of our fellow Americans were dying due to the lack of electricity to power oxygen tanks, dialysis centers, or refrigeration medications. Problems that, as I said at the time, could not be solved with paper towels. And I'll never forget this moment. It's one of the most insulting moments to the people of Puerto Rico, a people of the parts of the United States, 3.5 million United States citizens, who has served and worn the uniform of this nation, whose names on the Vietnam Memorial here in Washington are disproportionate to the number of their population. And the president said they want everything to be done for them. I hate to tell you, Puerto Rico, but you're throwing our budget out of whack. Now, no other American citizen in any other of the areas of disaster heard anything near to that. So today we know that nearly 3,000 Americans perished in what's now known as one of the worst natural disasters to strike our nation in all of American history. Now, let me be clear. We know that a president cannot prevent a natural disaster. But when the lives of Americans are on the line, we expect our commander-in-chief to do everything in their power to come to their aid. These are the moments that are supposed to reveal the very best of America. In the face of disasters of this magnitude, we do not turn our backs on our fellow citizens. We face the challenge head-on. We save as many lives as we can. We strive to stem suffering, and we lend a helping hand. That's the American way. Just imagine how many lives could have been saved had President Trump directed the Federal Emergency Management Agency to give Puerto Rico the, quote, A+ treatment that he called for in our fellow citizens in Alabama. But for the majority Latino, Spanish-speaking island of Puerto Rico, there was no A+ treatment. They got the F- treatment. The painful reality is that nothing can ever bring the thousands of Americans who died in Hurricane Maria back. But that doesn't mean the president shouldn't try to make things right. He has many opportunities to atone for his cruel and unfair treatment of the Puerto Rican people. But instead, President Trump seems intent on kicking Puerto Ricans when they're down. Just last week, he hosted a group of my Republican colleagues at the White House and proceeded to complain about how much Puerto Rico has received. And what's so disappointing is none of my colleagues even dared to check the president on this issue. They didn't receive what he said. They didn't receive a fraction of what he said. This president continues to behave as if the people who call Puerto Rico home are not real Americans. It's almost as if he views himself as the real victim here, not the 3,000 American mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters who perished in Hurricane Maria's wake. We in the Senate have an obligation to do what is right with this disaster supplemental. So let me say first that I'm glad everyone here agrees Puerto Rico needs a fully funded nutrition assistance program for the next fiscal year. But still, it was appalling to hear the White House call the House's bill, the House of Representatives bill, inclusion of an additional $600 million for nutrition assistance as excessive and unnecessary. Mr. President, there's nothing excessive or unnecessary about helping 1.35 million struggling low-income Americans in Puerto Rico, many of them with small children, avoid going hungry. We're talking about $649 a month for a family of 4, just $160 or so a week for people who need it the most. Let's turn for a moment to what's missing from the Senate legislation. First, Hurricane Maria created 6 million cubic yards of debris for the island. A year and a half later, the island still has approximately 168,000 cubic yards of debris stored in temporary sites waiting to be removed. To put that in perspective, a large dump truck can carry 10 cubic yards. That means it would take 16,800 dump trucks to remove all the garbage created by the hurricane in a small island that barely measures 100 miles long by 35 miles wide. Now, make no mistake, Puerto Rico has made significant progress, but the crippled economy has made everything that much harder. This legislation should help them get the job done, not set them back. Second, there remains hundreds of open FEMA projects for emergency protective measures. We're talking about short-term locations for government agencies to provide vital services as they await the completion of permanent reconstruction. We should also allow for the continued use of generators to power critical facilities on the island. This would help keep the public safe and provide stability to Puerto Rico's power grid while it's repaired. And we can do this by increasing the federal cost waivers for categories A and B to 100%, just as the House of Representatives bill does. Congress has done this many times before. This is not new. After Hurricane Katrina, Wilma, Dennis, and Rita, and Puerto Rico deserves no less. In the Bipartisan Budget Act we passed last year, we specifically authorized FEMA to waive Stafford Act requirements so they could replace and repair facilities in a way that reflects today's industry standards, not their previous subpar condition. And yet I keep hearing that FEMA is nickel and diming over what it may fix and what Puerto Rico may not fix. So let's end the ambiguity. Let's fix this language. Let's send a clear message that it was always Congress's intent to rebuild Puerto Rico stronger and more resilient than ever. No one wants to face the same kind of damage next hurricane season. As it's said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So let's properly fund the Army Corps of Engineers so they can help rebuild the Caño Martín Peña, which continues to flood over with raw sewage, imperiling 26,000 American lives with unsanitary conditions and breeding grounds for mosquito-transmitted diseases like Zika. These are the kind of measures that would be stripped from the House bill, Mr. President, by the pending substitute. It's just not right. It's just not right. These 3.5 million United States citizens have worn the uniform of the United States. They've defended this nation going back. The Congress gave an all Puerto Rican regiment, Los Borinquineros, the highest commendation it can, the Congressional Gold Medal. But that doesn't mean anything if you turn your back on 3.5 million United States citizens. Doesn't mean anything if you treat them as second-class citizens. And it's just fundamentally biased and wrong. And come September, we'll have to congregate once again to talk about the island's crumbling medical infrastructure and the need to provide Puerto Rico with additional Medicaid funding. We can solve that problem today by adding critical Medicaid funding for the territories. Look, Puerto Rico is clearly a subject of angst and resentment for the president. I don't know why, but it's clearly so. So I suggest we do him a favor. Spare him the worry and get the job done ourselves today. Let's do what is right. I would urge my colleagues to vote against cloture on the substitute, let the underlying bill stand, and let us move forward so that we act in the name of our nation. It's the United States of America. We leave no American behind, and we should leave none of the 3.5 million Americans in Puerto Rico behind. Mr. President, with that, I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
The senator from Texas.
to the intended